For 7 seasons, Clint Walker stood as the towering symbol of strength and justice on Cheyenne, embodying the fearless frontier hero millions admired. His commanding presence, calm authority, and quiet moral code made him one of television's most trusted figures. But behind that flawless image, a hidden struggle was unfolding. A devastating injury, dangerous surgeries, and silent battles with physical decline slowly dismantled the legend. His final episode was not just an ending, it was a reckoning that revealed the fragile cost of greatness. In the golden age of television westerns, when America searched for symbols of order, justice, and moral certainty, Clint Walker emerged like a towering monument carved from frontier myth. Standing over 6 feet 5 inches tall, with a voice as deep as thunder rolling across open plains, he did not merely play Cheyenne Bodie, he embodied him. On black and white screens across the nation, Walker became the physical representation of strength fused with restraint, courage guided by conscience, and power governed by unwavering morality. Audiences did not simply admire Cheyenne Bodie, they trusted him. In an era shaped by post-war uncertainty and cultural transition, Walker's presence offered stability. His calm authority soothed collective anxieties, while his quiet compassion restored faith in justice without cruelty. Each episode reinforced a simple promise: that goodness, when armored with strength, could still prevail. Behind that commanding figure, however, lived a profoundly private man. Walker was introspective by nature, uncomfortable with celebrity's artificial glow. While studios celebrated his rising stardom, he carried a growing unease. Warner Brothers rapidly transformed him into one of its most valuable television properties, binding him to grueling production schedules that demanded relentless physical exertion. Days stretched into exhausting marathons of action sequences, horseback stunts, and punishing outdoor shoots. Recovery time was scarce. Rest became a luxury. The contrast between the invincible hero on screen and the increasingly strained man off it widened with each passing season. Public appearances, promotional tours, and relentless fan attention chipped away at the solitude Walker deeply cherished. Interviews demanded charm. Press demanded availability. Studio executives demanded compliance. In private moments, the weight of these expectations pressed down heavily, creating a quiet psychological burden that few recognized. The role that elevated him was also slowly enclosing him. Yet Walker never allowed his fatigue to surface on screen. His professionalism bordered on stoicism. Each performance carried the same composed authority, the same disciplined restraint. Viewers never glimpsed the exhaustion behind his steady gaze or the physical toll accumulating beneath his tailored frontier costume. As Cheyenne soared in popularity, becoming one of television's defining westerns, Walker began to feel the subtle erosion of autonomy. Creative choices slipped further from his control. Scripts dictated not only his character's words, but his identity. Contracts tightened. Studio authority hardened. What began as artistic opportunity gradually transformed into contractual captivity. Success had delivered fame, but at the cost of personal sovereignty. The psychological tension intensified. Walker admired Cheyenne Bodie's moral clarity, yet feared becoming indistinguishable from the role. His personal aspirations, to explore diverse characters, to pursue creative depth, to preserve private life, receded beneath the relentless momentum of stardom. The industry rewarded consistency, not evolution. And so, the hero remained fixed, while the man quietly wrestled with internal dissonance. Physically, the strain was equally relentless. Western television demanded authenticity. Action scenes were not simulated, they were endured. Falls from horses, staged brawls, and harsh outdoor environments became routine. Each impact accumulated, quietly taxing bones, joints, and internal systems. The human body, unlike television legends, carries no immunity from consequence. As seasons passed, Walker sensed a fragile undercurrent beneath the triumph. His career stood tall, yet increasingly precarious. The role that secured immortality in popular culture simultaneously imposed invisible limitations. The stability audiences perceived masked a deeper vulnerability unfolding behind studio gates. The illusion of invincibility persisted, but reality was steadily carving fractures beneath the surface. In those early years, no scandal disrupted his image. No public collapse signaled danger. The decline was subtle, internal, and silent. A man admired for physical dominance began privately confronting the finite limits of human endurance. And yet, nothing in his disciplined temperament, nothing in his measured routines, could have prepared him for what lay ahead. Because the greatest challenge of Clint Walker's life would not come from Hollywood contracts or exhausting schedules. It would arrive suddenly, violently, and without warning. At the height of his fame, when Clint Walker's image as an unbreakable frontier hero seemed permanently etched into American culture, fate intervened with ruthless precision. Away from the cameras, far from studio lights, a violent skiing accident shattered the illusion of invincibility in a single catastrophic moment. What followed was not merely injury, but a profound reckoning with mortality itself. The impact was devastating. Multiple fractures tore through his massive frame. Internal injuries complicated recovery. Emergency surgeries became unavoidable. For weeks, Walker hovered between life and death, suspended in sterile hospital rooms where the applause of millions faded into the mechanical hum of medical machines. The towering figure who once embodied effortless strength now lay motionless, confronted by the fragile mechanics of his own survival. The physical pain was immense. The psychological toll was even greater. For a man whose identity had been built upon dominance, resilience, and physical mastery, helplessness became a foreign and deeply unsettling experience. Each breath required effort. Each movement demanded courage. In that stillness, Walker faced a haunting realization. Strength, once assumed permanent, could vanish without warning. Complications soon deepened the crisis. Infections threatened systemic collapse. Blood loss weakened vital organs. At one point, death loomed so close that physicians prepared for the possibility he might not survive. In those dark hours, the mythology of Clint Walker dissolved, leaving only a man grappling with fear, vulnerability, and uncertainty. Yet even as his body broke down, his will remained defiant. Recovery unfolded slowly, marked by brutal rehabilitation and relentless perseverance. Physical therapy became a daily battlefield. Muscles had to be retrained. Balance had to be restored. Pain became constant. Progress was measured not in leaps, but in fractions of regained mobility. This was no cinematic comeback. It was survival in its rawest form. Behind closed doors, Walker confronted deeper emotional turmoil. Fame, once intoxicating, now appeared distant and strangely hollow. The possibility of never returning to full physical strength forced him to question long-held assumptions about purpose and legacy. For the first time, the hero considered life beyond the screen, beyond applause, beyond public validation. Family became his anchor. Private moments replaced public triumphs. The stillness of recovery allowed reflection that relentless production schedules had never permitted. In those long hours of rehabilitation, Walker began reshaping his priorities, quietly disentangling his identity from the myth of Cheyenne. But the machinery of Hollywood did not pause. Studio contracts waited. Scripts accumulated. Production deadlines pressed forward. Despite medical warnings, professional obligation pulled Walker back toward the unforgiving pace of television. Returning to Cheyenne became both a necessity and a risk. His body, though healing, remained fragile. Every stunt carried amplified danger. Every action sequence threatened rangerie. Yet Walker returned, driven by loyalty, professionalism, and financial responsibility. On set, he masked discomfort beneath stoic composure. The familiar calm authority reemerged, though now sustained through disciplined restraint rather than physical ease. Viewers saw no difference. But beneath the costume, pain lingered. The hero remained unshaken. The man endured. This collision between vulnerability and obligation reshaped his perspective on fame itself. Hollywood's relentless expectations, once accepted as the price of success, now appeared dangerously indifferent to human limitation. Survival had granted clarity. The pursuit of perpetual strength no longer held the same allure. Instead, preservation of life, dignity, and inner peace began to outweigh career ambition. The accident permanently altered Walker's relationship with risk. Each role was reconsidered. Each stunt evaluated through the lens of survival rather than spectacle. The myth of invulnerability had been irrevocably dismantled. Yet despite physical recovery, something within him had shifted. The fracture was not merely in bone, but in identity. Clint Walker could no longer view Cheyenne Bodie as a destiny. The role had become a chapter, not a lifetime. And as he returned to the set, carrying both gratitude and caution, a silent understanding took root that this journey was nearing its conclusion. Because though Clint Walker returned to the screen, the man who emerged was no longer the same, and his final chapter on Cheyenne was already unfolding. When Clint Walker stepped back into the world of Cheyenne after his near-fatal ordeal, the cameras captured the familiar silhouette, the commanding stride, the steady gaze. To the audience, nothing appeared altered. Cheyenne Bodie still rode with authority, still delivered justice with restraint, still stood as the immovable pillar of frontier virtue. Yet beneath that controlled exterior, the man had changed in ways no script could reveal. The reality, however, was far different. Survival had reshaped his inner landscape. The physical trauma lingered in every movement, an ever-present reminder of human fragility. Old injuries flared under the strain of long shooting days. Each stunt carried the weight of risk once ignored. Pain, once fleeting, had become a constant companion. And with it came a deeper awareness that the body, no matter how powerful, possessed limits that could no longer be challenged without consequence. This was no longer the performance of invincibility. It was the discipline of endurance. Walker's portrayal of Cheyenne subtly transformed. The character's stoicism deepened. His silences grew heavier, layered with unspoken reflection. His restraint became more pronounced, his emotional control more measured. The shift was almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable to those who looked closely. Where youthful dominance once prevailed, a seasoned gravity now emerged. Behind the scenes, Walker wrestled with the narrowing boundaries of creative freedom. Years of contractual obligations had confined him to a singular identity. While the role had granted fame and security, it had also gradually restricted artistic exploration. Other opportunities passed by. Alternate paths remained unexplored. The weight of repetition pressed heavily upon his sense of purpose. The success that once liberated him now quietly imprisoned him. Conversations with studio executives became increasingly strained. Walker sought flexibility. Warner Brothers prioritized continuity. The tension reflected a broader struggle between individual agency and corporate machinery. As Cheyenne continued its successful run, Walker felt a growing urgency to reclaim control over his own life, to define himself beyond the towering shadow of Cheyenne Bodie. His near-death experience had crystallized this need. Mortality had stripped away illusion, revealing time as both precious and finite. What remained was a desire for meaning unchained from commercial expectation. For Walker, departure was no longer a risk. It became a necessity. The final episodes thus unfolded with quiet finality. On screen, no dramatic farewell announced his exit. No grand monologue declared his departure. Instead, his final appearance arrived gently, almost unceremoniously, mirroring Walker's own understated temperament. Yet beneath the surface, the moment carried profound emotional gravity. Each scene became a silent goodbye. Every measured gesture carried layered significance. The camera lingered just long enough to capture the subtle fatigue in his eyes, the reflective stillness in his posture. It was the farewell of a man closing a defining chapter not with spectacle, but with dignity. The legend was stepping aside, allowing the man to finally breathe. For Walker, leaving Cheyenne meant stepping into uncertainty. The security of stardom gave way to open possibility. Without the rigid structure of episodic production, he faced both freedom and ambiguity. The future, once scripted, now stood unwritten. Yet the departure also offered relief. No longer bound to relentless schedules or physical strain, he could pursue life on his own terms. Privacy returned. Family regained prominence. Personal identity, long eclipsed by fame, began to reemerge. But liberation carried its own questions. Without the myth, who remained? Without the role, what purpose endured? As Walker rode off from the series that had defined him, he stood poised at a threshold, suspended between legacy and reinvention. With his legendary role behind him, Clint Walker now stood at a crossroads, and the direction he chose would reshape the rest of his life. When Clint Walker stepped away from Cheyenne, he did not chase reinvention through louder roles or grander spotlights. Instead, he chose something far more difficult, a quieter life. A life stripped of relentless schedules, public expectation, and the illusion that fame equaled fulfillment. For a man who had stood as one of television's most recognizable heroes, this withdrawal was not retreat. It was reclamation. The reality of survival had reshaped his values. Near death had stripped ambition of its urgency, replacing it with clarity. Fame, once essential, now felt fragile. Success, once intoxicating, now appeared fleeting. What endured were relationships, health, and inner peace. Walker redirected his energy toward family, personal discipline, and selective work, choosing projects based on meaning rather than exposure. This transition was neither instant nor effortless. Decades of public identity cannot be shed overnight. The shadow of Cheyenne Bodie followed him into every room, every conversation, every casting discussion. Yet Walker no longer resisted the past. He accepted it with gratitude while refusing to be confined by it. Acting became occasional. Privacy became sacred. Simplicity became strength. In these quieter years, Walker discovered a deeper form of fulfillment. Nature replaced studio sets. Stillness replaced applause. Physical restoration became a daily commitment, not for performance but for longevity. His life slowed, yet his purpose sharpened. Strength, he came to understand, was no longer measured in dominance, but in endurance, restraint, and self-respect. Public admiration never faded. Fans continued to celebrate his iconic role, generations rediscovering Cheyenne through reruns and retrospectives. Yet Walker remained detached from nostalgia. He honored his legacy without clinging to it. The past existed as foundation, not destination. Through interviews and rare public appearances, he revealed a man shaped by reflection rather than ego. He spoke candidly about survival, discipline, and the cost of relentless ambition. His words carried gravity, earned through lived experience. He had seen how easily life could fracture, how swiftly certainty could collapse. Time softened the edges of hardship. Pain receded. Scars remained. Each reminder served not as bitterness, but as gratitude, proof that he had endured. As the years unfolded, Walker's life became an embodiment of quiet resilience. He cultivated solitude without isolation, purpose without performance, legacy without obsession. In doing so, he redefined heroism itself. The myth of the cowboy hero had given way to the reality of the human survivor. When he finally passed in 2018, tributes poured in from across generations. Colleagues remembered his professionalism. Fans remembered his dignity. Critics acknowledged his cultural impact. But beyond accolades, his story endured as a meditation on balance, between ambition and restraint, strength and vulnerability, success and meaning. His final episode of Cheyenne gained new resonance in hindsight. What once appeared as a routine departure now stood as symbolic closure, the moment where legend stepped aside so humanity could emerge. That final ride carried more than narrative consequence, carried the weight of survival, reflection, and acceptance. And in that farewell, Clint Walker left behind something far more enduring than fame. He left a lesson that true power is not found in towering stature or commanding presence. It is forged in humility, in recovery, in choosing life over legacy, in knowing when to step away. His journey reminds that even icons are bound by flesh and time, that beneath every heroic image exists a fragile human story, and that sometimes the bravest act is not pressing forward but letting go. Yet even now, decades later, the echo of that final ride still lingers in cultural memory. The The slow fade of his silhouette into the frontier horizon remains haunting, unresolved, and deeply human. And so, his story closes not with triumph, but with reflection. Because in the end, that final ride still echoes, reminding the world that every legend must one day confront its own mortality.